Do you ever feel like you're so much better than your opponents, but you can't seem to win big because one mistake wipes out all your profit? What if I told you there's one simple concept that could make you a consistent winner at 1-2 and 1-3 live poker? The best part? This concept is super easy. You don't need fancy moves or complex calculations. You just need to follow a pattern. My name is Andreas Wagner. I'm a live poker coach with 10 years experience of playing the live low stakes. And of all the concepts I teach on this channel, this one is the easiest to apply and yields the best results. Okay, to understand this concept, let's look at a simple hand example. You raise pocket aces in middle position over a limper. Big blinds and the limper call. The board comes out King 7 deuce rainbow. This is about as dry as it gets and you're feeling great even though you're up against two opponents. You bet half pot, the big blind folds, the limper calls. The turn is an offsuit 5. Would you fire again here or would you pot control? Well, you're up against a passive player who limped into this pot, then called your isolation raise and your c-bet on the flop. So I wouldn't expect him to bet the river. Therefore, I would definitely bet again here. How big? I want him to call with a king, possibly even a 7. If he's not an absolutely terrible player, then we can't go too big, but I would still go around 3/4 pot. He calls again. So far, so good. But then the river brings a jack, your opponent checks once again. What do? I can tell you that the way you play this river will determine whether you're a big winner or a not so big winner in this game. Everything so far has been quite standard, but now it's the crunch time. Would you check behind because you can't get more than 2 streets of value out of a king or a 7? Or would you fire the third barrel against this limper? The pot is already quite big, so betting big might be ambitious if he's not the very worst player. But you absolutely have to go for value on this river. You most likely have the best hand, so you want to extract some more money out of your opponent. I would go a bit below half pot simply because I don't want the bet to look too expensive. So say we bet $65. And now our limper raises to $175. Wow, I did not see that coming at all. What's happening here? This player has been extremely passive throughout the whole hand, and now on the river, after we triple barreled, he decides to check raise. What could he have? Well, whether he has a set or 2 pair hardly matters. But I'll tell you what he doesn't have, a bluff. If you call in this spot, you might as well Venmo him the money and save yourself the embarrassment of handing over chips. There is a tiny chance that he is overvaluing a hand like King Queen or King 10, but would he really check call twice with that hand to then check raise the river? I highly doubt it. 99.9% of the time, this is a river 2 pair or a slow played set or 2 pair. Remember, I said earlier that the way you play this river will determine how much of a crusher you are at live low stakes poker. That is because this river shows perfectly what the most important concept is at 1-2 and 1-3 live. Bet relentlessly for value until you face resistance. And once you face this resistance, fold. It's like driving a car fast but slamming the brakes before hitting a speed bump. Or like spotting when your dog's playful growl turns into hands off my treat territory. You don't want to mess with him in this spot. Let's break it down. In live poker, most players hate folding. They'll call with hands as weak as middle pair or even ace high because they're curious. That's where your edge comes in. By betting relentlessly for value, you exploit their curiosity and force them to pay for their mistakes. It's like charging them an entry fee to the What's in My Hand show. Instead of slow playing your big hand, you should bet aggressively and force them to pay to see more cards. Over time, this consistent value betting can pile up small wins and sometimes big ones. But here's the twist. There's a limit to this aggression. The moment your opponent starts pushing back, usually by raising you, is when you need to pump the brakes. Since your opponents at this level tend to be as aggressive as a house blonde, they'll almost never raise you with a bluff. That's why you can easily fold everything that doesn't beat at least some portion of their value range. But it's not always about getting raised. There is one other scenario where this applies. We can see it in this example. You raise ace-king in position, and this time only the small blind calls. Again, he's a passive recreational player. The flop comes king 10-9 with two hearts. This is a really wet board, but you still bet for value and your opponent calls. The turn is an offsuit 8, adding even more potential draws. Betting again here is a bit on the thin side, but I still think we can get called by weaker hands like king-queen, king-jack, jack-10, jack-9, queen-9, and all sorts of hearts combos. So you bet again and they call again. The river is the 10 of hearts, pairing the board and bringing in the flush. And before you can even think about whether you would want to bet this river or not, your opponent comes out betting pot. He bets pot on this nut-changing card. This is one of the clearest examples of a serious pushback. They could have a flush, a full house, or even a sneaky straight. Folding here may feel painful, but it's absolutely trivial. Sure, they might be bluffing with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, but most of the time they're not. They would have to turn a pair into a bluff here, which almost no recreational player ever does. But there's more to it. The size is the decisive tell here. In this example, he used a pot-sized donk bet on the river. But now let's change this to, say, a third pot bet, also called a block bet. This is a very different scenario. Don't get me wrong, we are still beat quite often when he does this. He can have a 10 or a straight that's afraid to go for bigger value, or he could even have a boat. But when he bets 1/3, we only have to be good 20% of the time. And I do believe that he can have a weaker king or a counterfeit 2-pair with 9-8 or some other nonsense that he doesn't know what to do with. So I would call here while still expecting to lose at least 60% of the time. But when he bets big, I expect to lose at least 95% of the time. And that's when you shine by folding. Live low-stakes poker is all about capitalizing on mistakes, but that means minimizing your own too. When you fold in these key spots, you're not just avoiding disaster, you're preserving your profit. Think of it this way. Folding isn't a sign of weakness, it's a tactical retreat. Betting relentlessly until you hit a wall is the quickest way to improve your win rate at live poker. It's like being a vacuum cleaner for chips. You're sucking up every loose penny on the table. But there are many other quick fixes to your game. In this video here, you can find out how you can boost your win rate quickly.